What's up, my Squidwards? Today we have a great episode. We're talking about vertical jump gains. So how much can we actually gain on a vertical jump program? How much could you gain on the Vertcode Elite? More importantly, how much can you actually gain throughout your athletic career? I break it down into 5 phases of gaining, right? And I break down each phase, and I can pretty much guarantee you're in one of these phases right now, whether you know it or not. And that identifying that phase is going to help you set realistic goals and expectations for yourself. Let's get it.
You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Favorites, and I'm an MBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it.
What's up, my Squidwards? How we doing? I hope you're feeling real squiddy today. We're going to get straight to it. Been a while. We've had a lot of updates going on at the house. So I don't know if you've seen little snippets on my Instagram story, but we put in the turf. So we put in like 45, 50 yards of turf in the backyard. It's going to be nice so our clients can get their sprints done, agility, a lot of our jumping out there on the turf. And we also just finished up the weight room. So it's coming along. We're going to be up and running just in time for like April, mid-April, when we actually start to get busy with basketball off season. So it's going to be good. We're going to have an opportunity for a lot of players to travel out this year of all levels. So in the past, my focus has really been NBA training, and that has really taken up 95% of my time when it comes to in-person training. The NBA stuff has really dominated my schedule. This is the first year that I'm really going to open it up to youth, high school, and just really prioritize anybody who wants to get better. So we're going to have an opportunity for people to fly out, train with me for a weekend or train with me for a week, get a full assessment, and then leave with sort of a blueprint for their training for the rest of the year. So that's kind of the idea of having this house, is to be able to bring people in and show them a good experience. So it's not just training, but we have our movie theater room where we can do film breakdowns, so you can enjoy the vibes and just lock in at the house and just get to the next level. So it's coming along. It's been quite the project. If you guys could understand how much stuff we've gone through trying to get this house together, it has been insane. In other news, I got 2 kids now. I went from 0 kids and not married to 2 kids living with me. So what happened was, obviously, Ashley and I got married, went on our honeymoon, came back, bought the house, started moving in, and then our nephews were in need of kind of a different lifestyle. And so Ashley's nephews, her 2 boys, 10 years old and 12 years old, they were back in Arizona, and we ended up getting temporary custody over them. So now they live with us in California, and they're going to school here. So that's been really cool having them around. Everybody was saying don't do it because it's going to add so much stress to your life with, being newlyweds and buying this house and all that. And obviously Ashley and I trying to still run the business, and people are saying don't do it, it's too much, but it's actually made life less stressful because kids are just so much fun. They're just comedians. They're constantly making you laugh. They're constantly making you see life from a different angle. When you would normally look at it from like a analytical, very serious point of view, they look at it from such a different point of view. So it kind of balances you out, and we end up smiling, 10 times more with them in the house than without them. So it's actually been a lot of fun. It's nice because they're both into basketball, trying to get them to understand that you got to put in like hours of work and not just like it's still fun for them where they want to go have fun for 15 minutes and then come in and play Fortnite for 4 or 5 hours. So we're trying to reverse that and take down the Fortnite time and kick up the basketball time. They've never actually played on teams, so they're starting off pretty far behind. But we're taking care of the things that you can't teach later on, right? And I think I've talked about this on my podcast before, but there's like certain windows where it's like after age 12, you can't get back certain traits. And so we're trying to build those now. Quickness, reaction, ability to see things sort of one step ahead. Like, these are traits that should really come early on. I've mentioned the stat, and I don't remember exactly what it is, but Dr. Yuri Vertcode estimated that, I believe it was after age 12, you're only going to increase your quickness, your raw quickness, 10% throughout your lifetime, even through your professional career. So from age 12 to the NBA, you're only going to improve that raw quickness by 10%. That's not a lot, right? You could improve your vertical jump by much more, your acceleration sprint speed, your lateral speed, because all of these things have to do with force. So we, improve our power to body weight ratio. We apply more relative force in the ground, and we can jump higher. We can run faster. But that raw quickness of just like, how fast do I react to something? How quick can I get that foot down to the ground? It doesn't really have to do with force. That's strictly how fast can we send that neural signal? How can we get it from the brain, the spinal cord, to the muscles and contract? And that's a trait that you cannot build later. You can't be like slow and then decide like, oh, quickness is really important, and then at age 18 start doing a bunch of quickness training. It's not going to work. So that raw quickness, that raw reaction, that spatial awareness, there's a lot of things where we got to build that real early on. And so with the kids, it's less like structured skills training. Like, we get in our ball handling, we get in our shooting, we get in our normal drills. I have them play a lot of one-on-one. But a lot of it is like, playing tag and, doing different reaction games, kind of making them play just like kids should be playing, but kind of add in a training component to those games as well. But they're coming along. Probably the biggest growth in anybody's game I've ever seen. But that's because they live with me. You kind of have no choice, and especially living here with the basketball court in the backyard. All right, today I want to talk about vertical jump gains. So specifically, I want to talk about what's possible. We get this question all the time. How much can I gain on your program? When in my career will I have the biggest gain? Sort of what age would you kind of expect those big gains? So let me start by saying, nobody knows, and it depends on so many factors, right? People always want a straightforward answer. When it comes to physiology, when it comes to the body, there is no straightforward answer, because genetics matters so much. Training age matters so much. Your early life experience matters so much. Where you played with as a child? Did you go outside and run around, right? Did you play tag? Did your parents pick you up and spin you in the air, or were you left in your crib? All of these things, believe it or not, have a huge influence on how athletic you are, how athletic you can become, where you're going to be capped at. There's certain things that we have to develop early on that you cannot develop later. So when you hear somebody say like, oh, he's just a natural, that guy's just a natural athlete. Well, it's not just genetics. It's also probably a combination of getting enough reps, but early childhood experiences. They're probably out playing more. They're playing tag. So when somebody says like, oh, they're just a natural, it's a combination of a lot of things. And so when somebody randomly asks me, hey, how much can I gain? I have no idea. It could be 15 inches in a year. It could be 3 inches in a year. It could be 0 inches because you're in the maintenance phase. So first, what I want to do is talk about what I consider to be the 5 phases of vertical jump gains. So phase 1, I call this the baby giraffe phase. All right. A lot of you guys are in the baby giraffe phase. This is basically your first year or your first 2 years of training where you look like a baby giraffe. You have no coordination. You're new to the training game. Everything seems to be difficult. Strength training is hard. Even a couple sets will make you sore. Mechanics are terrible. You look like a baby giraffe when you're trying to jump. So in this phase, your first couple years, or maybe you've been training for a few years, but it's your first time on an actual like hard program, structured program where you're training 5 days a week, you still might be in that baby giraffe phase. Because you're being exposed to so many new movements, so many new motor patterns that you're just not used to. So you still look like a baby giraffe. So in this phase, a lot of times you get big early gains, but it's because of coordination. It's nervous system improvements. You're learning how to fire the right muscles at the right time. You're learning how to fire and turn off the opposite muscles, right? So squeeze the agonist, relax the antagonist. When you're an actual baby giraffe before you get into training, a lot of times you go to contract, but you contract all sides of the joint, right? So you contract the hip flexor, you contract the glute, and then you get no extension velocity through the hip, right? But one of the early improvements that you start to see is you start to contract and relax the right muscles at the right time. So that is one of the big things. You start to figure out your mechanics. Like if you're on the Vertcode or Vertcode Elite, you watch the mechanics guide, you realize there's a lot of stuff that you're doing wrong, and you start working on that. Sometimes you have this initial decrease because you were so used to doing it a certain way, even though it's wrong. And, you think about it like this. I got this from Sal DiStefano. I was talking about jump mechanics with him, and he was like, it's kind of like typing, right? When you were a kid and you would type with your pointer fingers, you got really fast at doing that. And then if you had a teacher who told you, okay, now you got to use all your fingers because you're going to be so much faster, well, you had this learning curve. And so initially you became slower and you were probably pissed off. And then some of us, unfortunately, went back to typing with two fingers because we hated that performance decline. But if you give it enough time, right, after a couple months, what you do with all of your fingers is much, much faster than what you could ever do with two fingers. So we had this initial decline, but then we had a big gain on the back end, and now we're all happy that we type with all of our fingers, right? That's a lot how jump mechanics works, especially for those baby giraffes out there. You've been working on one type. Every time you go to touch a door, every time you go to touch the net, touch the backboard, whatever it is, you go do it with this certain type of mechanics. And now we're asking you to change. And so you're going to get this initial decline, and then you're going to get a good gain. The time frame just depends on too many factors. So I really can't tell you when you'll start to see the gains from your mechanics. We've had kids, and I've posted this a few times, we've had kids gain 6 inches in one session because they're going in with the crazy, like we had one kid go in with what I call the diving board bounce, where you basically jump stop and then you take off with a square stance. And then he started to make the changes that we taught him in the mechanic guide. He started to separate the feet, go with a 1-2 plant, add a little bit of a turn, add a little bit of length on his penultimate step, add a little bit of a bigger arm swing, and he improved 6 inches in one session. So that kind of stuff we see all the time. But I wouldn't say that you should expect that. For most people, it's going to take much longer. Now, when you're in that baby giraffe phase, the mechanics and the neurological gains can be big. Usually the physiological gains are small. And when I say physiological, I'm really just talking about like your muscle gains, your tendon improvements, right? Kind of your hardware instead of your software. And a lot of times your hardware actually declines because you're a baby giraffe and you're responding to a new stimulus, a new program. Usually you get a big decline. You're going to feel like you got weaker. You might have a harder time recovering than people who are a little bit more advanced because they're used to difficult, intense training, right? If it's your first time doing that, you're probably going to feel a little bit burned out. And so for you, you got to extend rest periods. You got to take multiple days between sessions. Don't just plow through a program just because it says, hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you got to do lower body. It doesn't mean that you should be sticking to that schedule. You should be listening to your body. So you might have to separate it. You might have to cut one of the workouts out. So usually if you're a baby giraffe, you're going to get a pretty good little decline early on. And then after our deload days, so like in the Vertcode, after month 1, we take a good little deload. I think you get 4 total days off, 2 weekends, 2 deloads. And you come back and then you'll get a little super compensation. So that means we'll actually start to see those gains once our body's fully recovered. All right, the next phase that I want to talk about, this is the good stuff, the vertical jump growth spurt. So I call it the growth spurt, just like every kid. Think about how most kids grow, right? It's like they're growing just a little bit at a time. And then they hit 1 year where they like really shoot up and they grow multiple inches. They grow 4 or 5 inches very quick. And then after that, they're not fully grown, but they still continue to just grow a little bit. That's a lot how vertical jump training often works. Again, depends on training age, genetics, your consistency, what program you're on, so many things. But I would say majority of the time it happens like this. Everybody gets one huge vertical jump transformation in their life. Now, when is that going to happen? Usually it's going to be your first couple years of training. That's when you're going to see that huge increase. Not always, though. I like to kind of rephrase that as maybe not your first year of training, but your first good year of training. Once you actually start training smart, you actually start training hard and consistent, you get all three of those things down, your vertical can take off. Sometimes you go through several years of training. You might go through 5 years of training, but you just weren't consistent or you didn't train smart in those 5 years of training. And then once you get on an actual real program, a good program that you can do consistently for a year straight, then you're going to get that vertical jump growth spurt. So it just depends on a lot of factors. Now, the other factor is where you're at, where your body's at, where's your hormones at. So sometimes you see the stars align and it's like the perfect storm. I've seen a few athletes get 15 inches on their vertical in a year on the Vertcode, but I think it was a combination of things. I think it was their first year doing a really good training program, but also it was them kind of getting on the other side of puberty. So you go through puberty and then you go from basically becoming a boy to becoming basically almost a full-grown man all of a sudden. And, you know, those two worlds collide and you can get some really impressive improvements. That's one of those things where even if you didn't train, you probably still would have gained 5 inches, you know, in that year because your body's filling out, your hormones are getting closer towards full-grown man compared to little boy. And so sometimes you have those two worlds collide and you can get really impressive gains. For some people, that doesn't happen right after puberty. For me, it didn't happen until I was, 20 years old. And that's because when I was going through puberty and even right after puberty, I just wasn't training the right way. Like I was training really, really hard, but just kind of mindless and no real goal and no real progressions. And the program that I was doing just didn't make any sense. It was just super high volume plyometrics. And then I was doing Olympic lifts, but like the sets, the reps, the progressions, none of it made sense. And so my training was kind of working against my physiology, right? My hormones were going up and I should be getting good gains, but I just wasn't. And then once I actually started studying the science and really learning how to train and I came up with my original system, that's when it really took off. And of course, around, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, that's, for jumpers, this is our prime. And we can extend it later, a little bit later than that, maybe all the way up to, late 20s. But physiologically, this is our prime. Like for strength sports, like powerlifting, your prime can hit much later. Anything really done slow, like heavy slow, you look at like strongman, you look at powerlifting, right? What can I squat? What can I deadlift? What can I bench? You see people breaking records later, 30s into their 40s. Jumpers, you don't see them breaking records anywhere near their 40s. Look at NBA players. They come in at their peak. At 19 years old, they jump their highest of their life. And then it's like just this flat line and then a decline. And hopefully that decline is nice and slow and steady. But most people don't improve their vertical once they get to the NBA. So a jumper's prime is, pretty early on. It's like kind of late high school, early college age. And so for me, that's when I really took off. My body had all the hormones it needed to make good gains. I paired it with a good training program and boom, I put 12 inches on in a year. Now, after your vertical jump growth spurt, I believe you have a honeymoon phase. So your vertical jump growth spurt is just like insane gains, right? What I'm talking about, 12 inches in a year. We've had people 15 inches in a year. Not saying that everybody can do that. Not everybody is ready for a vertical jump growth spurt. Not everybody's going to have the stars align perfectly with their body and with training. But it is very possible. Just know that people do it. It is possible. So after the vertical jump growth spurt, I believe you have your honeymoon phase. So your honeymoon phase, you still get some good gains. So my honeymoon phase was the year after I made my transformation. I continued to train hard for another year, consistently, didn't miss a week, and I put on another 5 inches, right? So overall, my vertical jump just transformed. But obviously, in the honeymoon phase, I'm not going to get the same results as the vertical jump growth spurt. But I think you could still trickle in some extra inches, throughout that honeymoon phase. So a lot of times you see people just get that big gain, and then afterwards, that year after, like the gains just consistently happen, right? It might be a half an inch every month that you continue to gain. And then you enter what I call the grind phase. So the grind phase is where a lot of people are. A lot of well-trained athletes are in this spot. You're done with that growth spurt. You're done with the honeymoon phase where all you got to do is do a smart training program and train consistently, and it just happens. The grind phase, you got to train hard, smart, consistently, be perfect, have a perfect diet, decrease psychological stressors, sleep the right amount. Like everything has to be perfect just to gain an inch or two. So the grind phase, everybody gets here, right? There's people who are delusional and think that they're never going to get here. The mindset in the vertical jump world is messed up because there's so many marketers that sell programs instead of like real trainers who actually know what they're doing. And so what they'll tell you is like, oh yeah, I don't care where you're at. We can put 12 inches on your vertical. Guarantee 12 inches. That stuff is fake, right? Anybody who says that just doesn't understand the science. They don't understand the body. So you're going to have law of diminishing returns, right? And so this is what I'm considering the grind phase, is where the law of diminishing returns really kicks in. You're getting closer to your genetic peak. And so now you got to go an entire year training perfect just to gain an inch. And then after the grind phase, you enter maintenance phase. This is where you have to do everything perfect. Train hard, train smart, train consistently, eat right, decrease psychological stressors. Everything has to be perfect, not to gain, just to maintain where you're at, right? And this gets a little bit depressing for some athletes, but you got to shift your mindset once you get to this phase. So think about an NBA player. Usually late high school, early college, their bounce is at their peak. Maybe rookie year, sophomore year of the NBA, there's maybe going up a quarter of an inch, a half an inch, nothing significant. Most people don't go up once they get to the NBA, right? And so now you start to flatline, but you want to keep that flatline for as long as possible, right? The guys that keep it as long as possible are the Vince Carters, the LeBron James, right? So you really keep that athleticism for as long as possible. If you can maintain that without losing an inch for a decade, from your 20s to your 30s, right? And I'm talking about an NBA player, which it's hard for them to gain because their body's under so much stress playing so much basketball, and the offseason being short. So if you could just maintain that vertical for a decade, you're going to be in a really good spot, right? That's a win. You look at like Vince Carter. Vince Carter didn't gain in the NBA. He just did a really good job of maintaining. And then once he started to decline, it was like, an inch a year instead of, for a lot of people, it's like 3-inch decline every year. And so guys like him, guys like LeBron James, like nobody's making the argument that LeBron James improved his athleticism, right? He didn't improve his athleticism. He just maintained it for a really long time. And he's definitely a little bit less athletic right now than he was early days in Cleveland, but it's not by a lot. Right? The untrained eye who doesn't really study this stuff would look at those two players and say they're the same. And that's a good thing, right? I can see some differences. He's lost a few inches, but he's 35 years old? So that's a major victory. He's in that maintenance phase of his career, but he's just keeping it for as long as possible. So I understand that the maintenance phase is boring, but it's so important. And even if you're not competitively playing, right? Like I don't competitively play anymore. I play pickup here and there. But like I don't need to have a 45-inch vertical, but I want to keep my vertical as high as I possibly can. So I like to keep it around 40. And the reason is once age really starts to hit me hard and I start to get a decline, then I'm already up here. And so that decline is a lot more gradual. And the reason that that's important is because one of the things that we lose as we age is fast twitch muscle fibers. And then you look at, I think it was Dr. Andy Galpin who mentioned, he's like, once you stop jumping, you start dying. And he's not saying like everybody should be doing plyometrics late in life, but what he's talking about is like older individuals that go out and they do their aerobic work, slow twitch, right? They need to be doing explosive things. So explosive is a relative term. So maybe that's a body weight squat for them. I'm talking about an elderly individual. Maybe that's a body weight squat where they're just moving fast on the way up. Maybe it's getting in the water and just doing flutter kicks and moving their legs as fast as they possibly can, right? So you have to maintain that explosive ability as you age, and that is going to have a huge influence on your quality of life when you're older. So if I can stay at a 40-inch vertical for as long as humanly possible, my decline is going to be so gradual. So then late in my 40s, late in my 50s, into my 60s, I'm not going to be able to jump out the gym, but I'm still going to have a lot of my fast twitch muscle fibers because I started at such a high point and because I'm maintaining that fast movement every week. I'm exposing myself to fast movements which maintain those good, healthy fast twitch muscle fibers, right? So I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I want you guys to understand that you're going to enter a maintenance phase. And don't consider it boring, consider it life essentials. Like this is how you prepare for the rest of your life, is maintaining a certain level of explosiveness. Now, the other mistake that people make is they're delusional. Maybe it's because of all the crazy marketing stuff that you see all over social media. Maybe they're delusional, but a lot of people think that, hey, you know, I've been training really hard and consistently for the last 7 years. I'm just going to start this new program and I'm going to improve my vertical by 12 inches without considering like, well, my training age is really high. And so maybe my goals are kind of out of line by saying that I should put 12 inches on with this program. And so what I want you guys to keep in mind is when you start doing a training program, say you've been training for 5 years, if your results come really slow, that doesn't mean that it's not working. That means that it is working, but you're closer to your genetic peak. And so what people do is they start a training program and they're like, oh man, you know, I'm 5 months in and I only gained 2 inches. Well, maybe you're in that grind phase. So if you're in that grind phase, right, you're past the honeymoon, you're past the vertical jump growth spurt. If you're in the grind phase and you put 2 inches on in 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, or 8 months, that's big. That's huge. And so what people do is they go, oh, well, it's not working. And they try something else. And then they go somewhere else and they try that, and that doesn't work. And then they go somewhere else and they become a program hopper, right? They can't consistently stay on one because they're looking for these delusional results that don't really exist in the grind phase. And then people get to the maintenance phase and they're doing a good training program that's having positive effects. It's allowing them to get a year older without losing an inch. That's a positive effect, right? They get to these programs and they start going, oh, well, I'm not gaining, right? I'm not improving, so I got to do this. And they start a new program and then they fail. Oh, I got to do this. And then they start a new program and they fail. And by program hopping and not having the right progressive stimulus, now instead of maintaining, they're going to start to decline. And so you got to know kind of where you're at in your training career and stop listening to the marketers that say it doesn't matter where you're at, doesn't matter about your genetics or your training age. We can get you 12 inches. It's just a lie. So again, I know you probably clicked on this video waiting for me to tell you what the human body can possibly do. How much can we possibly increase? Unfortunately, there is no answer. And if somebody gives you an actual answer to that question, they don't study the science. They don't understand how physiology actually works. So the conclusion of that is be self-aware. How many programs have you done before? How many years have you been training, right? How old are you? All of these factors are going to influence which phase, which of those 5 phases that I just described, which one are you in? Because then your goals can kind of start to change and you're not going to be delusional looking for that big 15 inches in a year if you're not actually in your vertical jump growth spurt. Kind of to wrap that up, one, a good piece of advice is to focus on the smaller goals, right? Focus on training goals, not just results-oriented goals, not just how much can I improve my vertical, but can I improve my rear foot elevated split squat strength? Can I get my RSI up? So maybe you don't test your RSI, but if you do, how can I improve my RSI? How can I feel more reactive off the floor? How can I get more effortless and springy in my plyometrics? How can I get my core stronger? How can I improve my 3/4 court sprint test? How can I improve my lane agility? How can I improve my lateral speed? How can I feel better on the court? So have some outcome goals, right? But have outcome goals outside of just vertical jump, and then have process-oriented goals. So like the exercises themselves, how are you getting better at that exercise? Have goals of like, how consistent can I stay on a program? How many days in a row can I go without missing a scheduled training day? So switch up your goals, keep yourself excited by enjoying the process itself. Be self-aware of where you're at in your training career. And remember, do not compare yourself to somebody else's results. All right, guys, as always, let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to address more questions on this topic in the future. And as always, if you're ready to sign up for the Vertcode Elite, or our ball handling program, check out pjfperformance.net. Thousands of athletes are getting to the next level. It's your time to get on the grind. If you're a trainer, physical therapist, sports coach, skills coach, check out Edge U. So myself and sports scientist Max Schmarzo put together this great resource where we do presentations, we do in-depth videos, we do exclusive podcast talks for coaches specifically to get to that next level and improve your clients' results. Until next time, I'm out.